Hello, everybody. I'm Andrea. This is Voices in the Dark, and I'm continuing my series of interviewing friends. In this case, John, a co-host of the podcast on Normal Circumstances.
This is real Voices in the Dark now.
Yeah.
None of this seeing other people.
Is it podcast polyamory?
It is, but it's okay. We're into free association when it comes to geekery, at least.
So, the idea is that we talk about things that we love. I think that's what nerddom or geekdom is: falling in love with things that are cool.
Isn't it strange that that's seen as like a negative nerddom and geekdom, where it's like people have passions, and we're like, no, not unless it's the right passion.
Basically it. Because I think if you love anything that's outside of the list of pre-approved things that you can love, that's considered bad. So in the 50s, it was perfectly okay to love cars. In America, I'm using the American culture as an example. I don't know what it was like here, but tinkering with cars and things, and being obsessed about improving performance, perfectly fine geekdom. But liking spaceships and things like that, reading comic books, got wedgied for that. So we're gonna have a drink.
Bring it on.
It's whiskey, Speyside single malt Scotch whiskey, and we thought it was like a basically. M&S own brand type thing where they relabel something that...
It will be. We need to research what it actually is, but the description used the word redolent, and you were like, sold.
Yeah, I love when they use words that I'm like, I haven't even heard that word before, let's say.
I always thought, I think it was, in my mind, it was pronounced redolent, but that's clearly wrong. So it's like redolent of particular flavors. I'm not sure if you read what the flavors it's relative.
It's redolent with vanilla... but not just normal vanilla. It had like a specific word adjective for that.
Fancy vanilla.
Yeah, and cinnamon, which I always like. Whiskeys that say that they've got some cinnamon in it tend to be ones that I'm usually partial to.
Speyside in general is a really nice place to start if people want to experiment with single malt whiskey, because it's powerful. Often it has some nice distinctive characteristics of Scotch malt whiskey in general, but I think it's maybe a bit more accessible on the whole. It's not like Islay, starting with Islay, where it's all peaty and punching you in the face, which is where I started, and now, it conditioned me. Now I really want the strong stuff, but this will be good.
Where is Speyside a location?
Yes, it's a region. I mean, cheers indeed. It's there's a few principal regions. I'm not going to remember them all. I think there's 5. So there's Islay, there's Highland, there's Speyside, and there's Lowland. And I think I'm missing one out. So I hope my brother doesn't see this because he'll mock me forever. But broadly speaking, they have certain shared characteristics. I think due to just the nature in which they're being made, like literally nature. Such as the water that's there, the earth that's there, and so on.
I think there's no all the various ones are named after a location, right? There's no kind of they're all named after a different location of Scotland, all the different kinds.
Well, with these broad categories, that's right.
I remember we had a really nice whiskey tasting experience where they kind of went over the differences between them, and it was really quite cool.
It's good that I have such a shit memory, because it means I can do whiskey experiences and tastings and tours over and over again. It always feels new. I'm like, oh yeah! Oh well.
I think that's one of the advantages you get. Like, I used to remember, I could pretty much play a movie back in my head as a kid. Like, I would know what the line would be next, kind of thing. As I got older, that seems to have faded. So now I'll watch a movie, I'm like, what? I don't remember this.
Although, are there classic ones that you know from childhood that you still know? Because I watched, around Christmas time, they had Home Alone 2 on TV, and it was eerie that before that everyone spoke, I was like, I know what you're going to say,
Funny stuff. But I guess it's in a way it's a perk, if you embrace it, of being able to re-experience things.
I saw a tweet, I'm sorry I'm derailing us already, but a tweet that was from Macaulay Culkin the other day said, I just turned 40. Do you feel old now? You're welcome.
Like, whoa.
He looks rough for 40 though.
That's what I think heroin. Because he had like a drug thing.
I mean, who wouldn't in his situation?
And he plays in a band which sings exclusively about pizza, I think.
That is so self-indulgent. It's remarkable.
But yeah, funny fella. Anyway, we're here to talk about The Expanse.
Yeah.
Because, well, it's something that you really like, that you introduced me to. I was a bit resistant at first.
And then I just said, I'm putting it on and sat you there for hours.
Yeah. I think the trailer was putting me off for some reason. I don't remember why. And the first season I found a little bit challenging. I think because I'm at a point in my life where I don't want characters to make stupid decisions. Like, I can't have that. Like, I've been too stressed out by Game of Thrones and other things like that. I want a world where there's interesting characters that basically have no challenges and breeze through things. And I can't take it anymore emotionally.
I think you need to go back to, like, kids' TV.
Yeah,
but even then, it might be too much.
Yeah,
you know?
too intense. But once I got past the first season, and it was pretty interesting anyway. I think I was just frustrated by the plot, not because it was bad, but because
it's quite hard to keep up at first. I don't know if that was the issue you had, but a few people I've introduced to the show have felt that it's so breathless and you don't know what the bigger picture is for most of the first season. That you just kind of, what the shit?
Yeah, I sort of have no idea where it's going, and I guess it's a completely different world, and it kind of doesn't dumb it down for you to kind of get up to speed. It's not like overly explained, which is good, but it does take a little while to kind of catch up with all the lingo and things that are happening.
I think it was interesting for me that you suggested that it would be The Expanse we talk about. I was like, I must have been propagandizing this quite heavily, like more than I thought. But I really enjoyed the show, which I guess is the easier access point for people. It's on Prime. In fact, it had a lot of fan support, and they had a few seasons on Sci-Fi in America. And then they just got let go, even though I think, as far as I'm aware, like the viewing figures were good, you know, the critical consensus was very good, but they just decided not to continue. And then this groundswell of fan support came up that eventually, I'm not sure if they caught the eye of Jeff Bezos or if Jeff Bezos was kind of into the show anyway, but he was just like, snap of the fingers, save the show, you got 2 more seasons at least, come on board.
Well, Jeff Bezos is a spaceman, right? Like, he also wants to go to space, like most billionaires.
He's not doing a very good job of it, is he?
No, not as good as Musk is doing. Musk is the one that's doing the best out of the billionaires trying to go to space. It was Richard Branson for a while, but Musk's SpaceX is actually making some relevant industry leaps in advancements of technology in that space, as opposed to just, you know, being a...
Doing it for shits and giggles.
Yeah.
So I got into the show. I felt compelled by... I felt the reality of these characters. Like, at first I wasn't sure, you know, it's just gonna be another space show. I like the weird ethical questions that come up, and we'll explain more as we go along about it, but particular characters I got really gripped by, and I thought it'd be interesting to read the books knowing that it's based on books, so I can become the guy who's like, well, in the books, actually. And then my boyfriend Jamie bought me the first book for Christmas, and they've got terrible covers. I really don't like the covers. They look so schlocky.
It's so hard for me to get a book with a terrible cover.
Yeah.
I know it's not the cover that makes the book, but it's psychologically.
It makes it look like it's sort of schlocky space opera in the bad sense. Space opera can be good. This looks kind of trashy. So I was like, maybe it's going to be a bit like reading a TV show tie-in, where it's like, you know, not that good. I was entirely wrong. I was saying to you before we started recording, usually I don't read like the same author back to back. I like a change, cleanse the palate.
Yeah.
I read book 1, and then I read book 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and I would have read 9, but it's not out yet.
Yeah.
That's the last one. So that was a really unusual experience for me. I'm just like, I'm not bored. I need to know what happens next. I love this world, and just became, I guess, a zealot for the show.
You were just evangelizing it to me. Like, you were like, you have to watch this. Have you watched it yet? And I was like, oh my god, fine. Let's see this thing.
Fine, I'm gonna hate it, whatever.
Yeah. But by season 2, I'd fallen in love with it.
Mm.
And I don't know if it's the same with the books, but each season has a self-contained mystery kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. Each season is a book, and that's why I think it works so well.
Yeah. And it's, well, to give it like a brief, not too spoilery kind of explanation, it's a bunch of people in a world where it's sort of in the future, but not too distant future. One where we've done space travel, but it's only to kind of the more immediate areas of the solar system, Mars, the asteroid belt, the moons of Jupiter, and there's little colonies there that are under the thumb of the Earth government, mostly.
The UN.
It's kind of funny in itself, the idea that UN will be an all powerful thing that can exert its will right now. It can barely get people to agree to anything. But Mars has broken free. It's an independent nation.
Yeah, essentially because they became very militarized. Before they were just going to seem like a kind of backwater. They want to terraform, but it's a really long-term project that's going to take a very long time. But they became a military power, which put them more on, not an even footing, but allowed them to claim their independence against Earth. And then the belt, the asteroid belt, and the people in it, the Belters, are kind of the third nation who's seen, they're treated as an underclass because they're like the couriers, they're the people in the middle between these powers who have the military might.
Yeah.
And they're kind of fascinating because they have become their own thing, not least because they live mostly in low or zero gravity. So they can't, many of them cannot ever go to a planet. Their bodies can't handle the gravity of it.
Yeah, bone density is too low, the muscles too weak.
It's not so clear in the show, but like in the book, they're much taller, skinnier, like they're very distinctive in how they look. And they're pretty angry about being this underclass. So they've got a sort of a loosely aligned groups called the OPA, the Outer Planets Alliance, who are kind of semi-terrorist, semi-freedom fighter. There's different factions trying to get their own agenda in play.
Yeah. So you got this kind of very complex political sort of framework situation with different factions vying for power. You know, people that are betraying their own faction in each of them.
Yeah.
People that are trying to make their particular, you know, planet or thing supreme or get independence, things like that. That's the backdrop. It's funny that could be in itself the story. But then you throw on top of that another element which could fuck all of them up or subjugate or like give power to one over the others, which is, should we give like a little spoiler alert?
Well, I suppose, yes, I guess. I mean, you don't know. Because you haven't read the books. There's a lot more to be revealed, so you're not going to be giving away much by saying what the proto-molecule is.
Right, so there's this thing called the proto-molecule, which seems to be alien in origin. Unclear at the beginning whether it's an alien itself or maybe an AI left by an alien, something like that. And people are trying to weaponize it, but it seems to have its own agenda.
And it causes a huge disturbance that each of our three main factions, the Earth, Mars, and the Belters, think is being used against them. In fact, the whole of the Expanse has got something I really like about the books, the narrative, is that it's so readable, it's so easy, and yet there are these little gems thrown in there that are kind of reflecting on what is it to be human, and why do we keep fucking things up.
Yeah.
And what they've done in the way they play out the story is, here's this new thing, it's going to unsettle the balance of power, and it plays out as, first of all, we turn on each other and attack each other and blame each other. Then, if it looks like there needs to be a united front, we're still going to try and be like trying to take the advantage and use it and say one thing and do the other. I think one of the, I haven't compiled them yet, but I started like folding the pages down where there were bits in the book that I just wanted to take the lines. And one of the themes, like a grand view of history that comes through, is this idea that humanity always seems to take the bad route and always seems to like choose the immediate term rather than the long term.
Yeah.
And I think a few times they say something like, our experience is, like, human history is mostly people trying to recover from the last disaster, which I find, I don't know, it hits me, and I could do a lot of thinking on that. Is that what we are? That we're always in recovery mode from the thing that happened before, like the way that shapes our current values, the priorities that we make, the prejudices we have, which then leaves us totally unprepared for the next disaster because we're always acting in relation to something that's happened and is over.
Yeah. Well, and isn't it the saying that the biggest thing you learn from history is that people do not learn from history?
Unfortunately.
They just
over and over.
Because I think on average human beings really struggle to truly imagine something they have no experience with. Mm-hmm. Some people have a good enough imagination that even though they can't truly ever know something, let's say for a man to know what it's like to be pregnant, some people have a good enough imagination to get a glimpse of it. Those kinds of people are the people that go, if we go down this path, we're going to have a fascist regime in about 30 years. Mm-hmm. And everybody goes, stop saying that, we're never going to make that mistake again, you're just trying to make us scared. And then boom, it happens. Because they can't imagine it. They can't go beyond a very limited scope. But some people can. And I think
part of the problem is that we generally think that we're smarter than people in the past. Yeah. They're like, so the Nazis came to power because people were dumb. No. They also thought they were fairly smart and were pretty much as smart as you. Like maybe they didn't have microwaves, but
and it's there's a really good bit by George Carlin that is really relevant today about how American is headed down a fascism authoritarian route. And he, it's really funny, but it's also really poignant, especially because it was done 10, 15 years ago. And things that he was saying then are coming true now. About how when America will do fascism and sort of Nazism, it won't be, with swastikas. It'll be coded in the American flag. And he explains it. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what's happening right now. It's being packaged as American patriotism. Make America great again.
Well, this is a whole dangerous area to get into, I suppose. But that's what Nazism was too. That's what Italian fascism was too. It's like, let's be great. Yeah, we're a great nation, and things haven't been feeling so good. So let's recapture our deep historic glory and bring it to the fore once again.
But the average person is waiting for people to be goose stepping as the warning signal, as opposed to the things that will work within your society. Mm-hmm. It'll be like, if people around Hitler's time were kind of waiting for the next Napoleon and going, no, but he's not, doing this French thing, so he must not be bad. It's sort of a myopia around not being able to see the similarities under the differences, I think. But anyway, so we sidetracked onto...
Well, I think the Expanse brings up a lot of these thoughts that whilst you're in... At first, we're quite focused on our little team, our particular group who end up with a ship that they call the Rocinante, named after Don Quixote's horse, which is...
I think it's pretty amazing. Love it.
It's nicely done. Still not read Don Quixote.
No, it's a hard read, I think. I remember trying to have a look at it, although it's a hard read in your native language, but I think I was also going I'm going to learn...
Spanish too.
With a book that's originally written in Spanish, but it's I think it's 15th, 16th century Spanish or something. No bueno.
But bigger than that, and what they do in the show, which is quite impressive, is that they rapidly unlock the wider world, which partly makes it a lot to take on at first. But the books take the approach of kind of George R.R. Martin style, and so the books are by James S.A. Corey, but there's actually two people, one of whom is George R.R. Martin's assistant, so I don't know if there's some influence. They have point of view characters.
Yeah. First person writing, which isn't that common for
it's not first person
narrative, isn't it?
No, it's still, what's it called? Third person indirect or something.
Okay.
But that's not it's, say, Holden, James Holden is one of the characters.
But during that chapter, can't see other people's thoughts, only that one primary character.
That's right. So it's focused on them. I'm sure there's a very specific term.
Okay.
And what's also cool is that whilst it's not saying the kind of narrative that emerges in each chapter is reflective of the character they're talking about. So one of the characters that we'll talk about a lot, Amos, my favorite, he's a very tactical, simple kind of guy in some ways. So what would just be the author's voice, but in his chapters, is if he goes in a room, you're going to hear that like there are 2 exits and there's 1 window and this guy's probably carrying a weapon. It's just, sort of casually in there. But for other characters, that wouldn't come up because that's not what they're thinking about. Yeah. I think it's quite cool how they change the way they're writing.
You can feel the personality. Probably without using names, you can kind of figure out which the character is just by a paragraph.
Yeah.
If you get to know them.
Exactly. It took me a while to pick up on that because it's really subtle, but it works very, very well. And out in the show, what I was going to say is they paint more of the bigger world sooner, whereas in the first book we just have 2 characters. We have Detective Miller, and it's kind of noir detective vibe that I like, and we have James Holden, who's a sort of Don Quixote figure who's easy to hate, but I've come to really like Holden. I see quite a lot of myself in him, that he's sort of naive and wants to do the right thing. And part of the arc is the fact that this good guy who would normally be your sort of like a superhero but without superpowers, who tries to do the good thing, it's him being smashed in the face by a reality that smarter politicians, people with different agendas are not going to be okay with. He thinks that all you have to do is give the people the full information. So he just broadcasts stuff consistently. Like, we found this and we think these people did it, but we're not sure. Doesn't matter because the headline is, these people did it. Mars was behind this or whatever. And he has to learn this sort of growing up lesson that you can't just be that guy. But he goes through this arc that I find fascinating, that he becomes more and more beaten down by that and turning to like, well, we have to just look after ourselves. Let's be utilitarian. Let's be more and more cynical.
He seems very, at least in the TV series, he seems like someone that's getting very depressed at times.
Yeah, and he has this. It's funny to see, because I don't know how much we see this and not played out so long. Someone who's this really good person, who becomes a bit broken down by it and has this inner war of, is this who I am now? That I'm the guy who pulls the gun first, who shoots first. And he kind of comes back from it, but in a different, more layered way. He can't just go back to naive, galumphing guy, but he also can't be the guy who pulls the gun first.
It's an important lesson that there are some levels of idealism that just don't work in the real world because you just butt up against human nature. You might wish that explaining everything to everyone means that we'll be like, why were we fighting? We are friends. Yeah. But in reality, people are guided by emotion. They got childhood trauma we were talking about, like, and other things, so they'll see the same information as an attack, and you can't skip biology and psychology just because you're a pragmatic intellectual that thinks that it's like, oh, I can bypass all that, like,
because everyone will see the truth the same way because it's the truth, and that's not how it plays out. I feel such sympathy for Holden that he's trying to do all this stuff, but what's interesting is he goes too far, and then the people close to him and are like, you're not, who are you now? We're not cool with this. We want to follow you. You're the natural leader. Like, he didn't particularly want to be the captain, but everyone was like, you're that guy. Like, that's your role, and we're down with that.
Yeah.
Which I kind of like, that it was just, he was the one, and he's like, okay.
They always say that the best leader is the reluctant one, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like someone that can handle the responsibility but doesn't want it. Because most of the time people that want it, they're just too easy to corrupt by the power that they get. That craving leads you down dangerous roads.
And he takes on that role, but he has to kind of come back to himself to be able to move forward and have the people close to him. One of the things that I like most about reading the books anyway, I don't know how they'll play this out in the later seasons, is that our little group on the Rocinante, they end up, at different times, it shouldn't be spoilery that they're going to end up doing separate things and some of the what's to come. That they each, it's funny because they would never know this themselves, they don't tell each other, but they struggle with different challenges they have, and they think, what would this shipmate of mine do? And they imagine talking to them. And I think that's what I think a healthy person would do. I mean, it depends what role model or like person you have in your head. But to think that the people who you respect, you carry in your mind as like an avatar, and you think, what would they do? How would I don't feel I have the resources to do this. And then when you recognize that, when you do spend time with those people, maybe you can be more appreciative of how they sort of complete, I don't know if they complete you, but their presence in your life creates a better sense of balance and ability to deal with so many more things.
Well, you are affected by the people that you admire or that you love or care about. They imprint some of themselves on you. Because I think because of the way the brain works, the mirror neurons and everything, as you build a mental image of someone in your head, because your brain's trying to figure them out and kind of empathize with them, basically that part of them that you kind of draw a sketch of becomes a piece of you.
Yeah.
So if you hang around someone that is super easygoing, you will borrow a little bit of that. Like that'll pull, even if you're quite rigid, some of that will rub off on you. And the part of you that is like that, because I'm sure maybe you'll probably have it somewhere, will become colored by that person, because you will associate easygoingness with that person. And so that part of yourself becomes that avatar almost. It becomes that voice. So if you ever talk to the part of yourself that's easygoing, it's probably that voice of that person. At least that's how I think about it.
And the character of Amos kind of brings that out in particular. That I think it was more him I was going on about to you rather than the show for the longest time.
Yes, that was what you were focusing on.
Before I get into him, what stood out to you when I was like going blah 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 Amos?
I just liked at first whenever someone says you really like this because I think you'll relate to it, like my initial reaction is like, fuck you, no. Like whatever, because it's kind of like a judgment on you a little bit, right? Like it's not, but I think you were thinking quite rightly that there are elements of Amos that I have.
I mean, maybe that's how it seemed that I was saying, like, he's like you. I kind of meant more, I think you would find him fascinating. And I also feel very connected to him in some of his struggles. So it wasn't just like, you're this guy.
But when someone says that, the initial thought is like, we'll see.
I am unique. I am uncopyable.
But it is an interesting part of the psyche to explore, because he is someone who is a little bit of a sociopath to some degree.
I think he basically is. But
it's funny because I think the mental association of sociopath is that it's an all or nothing thing, which is probably not true in reality either. Like, I don't think there's anyone that's 100% a sociopath. But because he has emotions, I think they're just kind of pushed down.
He doesn't know what they are, yeah.
Abstracted from himself because of the trauma of the environment that he grew up in. He couldn't show that side of himself. It became a shadow. Like, he put his shadow, talking about the stuff that we've been recently talking about, the concept of the shadow from Carl Jung. I think he locked away part of himself so tightly because it would be a weakness to you be that person, that it was no longer accessible to him consciously.
And yet for him, the things brief summary, the shadow is basically the parts of yourself that you become socialized to hide away. But for a lot of us, that could be our sort of more negative, violent things. For him, it's more like the tender, nice, caring things that had to go away.
Can't afford to have morality or to have a soft side because you'll die. He locked it away. And so, but funnily enough, he's not a dick. So when he knows that part of himself is something he thinks he doesn't even have, potentially. And so he doesn't want to be an asshole, and therefore he gravitates towards people that he judges to be upstanding moral characters that he can model.
Yeah. he sort of outsources his morality to people that he trusts to do the right thing, and he's like, well, I don't get it. I don't know how to think about these things or do it right. I think you do. So you've proven yourself to me. I'm in. Tell me what to do.
And that's really fascinating. And I especially liked that the person he initially selects for that loses his trust in the tea. I don't know about the books, but she does something that is so out of whack that he no longer, like, she loses that position in his mind. And he then gravitates more towards this Holden character.
Yeah. I think it was very upsetting for Amos to think that Naomi was scared of him. That's one of the elements of what she does, that he wanted to feel, I guess he felt seen and trusted, and then to discover that no, that was very, very jarring. Something about, he has this clear vision in so many other aspects of life, and this sort of straight talking thing he's not trying to make fights and so on, but there are certain situations where he's like, well, I can recognize that you are a manipulative person and a violent person and a killer. I'm also in this kind of area, and it seems pretty clear that we're going to fight. Do you want to do it now or later?
Okay.
And it's
cuts through the bullshit.
It's amazingly charming in a way. It's fascinating because it's so, never mind the, I'm not sure, and the maybes, and he just sees what actually is, which isn't great for forming close personal sensitive bonds in various ways, but is very, very good for when you just need stuff to be done and to get rid of the bullshit.
And it's respected. The authenticity of it is respected, which is, it was interesting to see that kind of, for me, a role model he is in a way, even though you probably shouldn't look at him that way, because that part of myself is something that is kind of being a little bit beaten out of me, not literally, but that kind of just being maybe we shouldn't be friends then, kind of if we that just straightforward kind of thing. Reality has repeatedly told me that if I engage in that sort of thinking and behavior, that people won't like me and I won't get what I want. You can't say that, but he's just owning it. He's so far on that side of the spectrum of it that he can't really do anything else about it. So therefore he just embraces it. And funny enough, people respect him for it.
There's a truth to him and how he is that I find incredibly appealing and fascinating. And it's funny then when there are things that he doesn't understand, and he has to check in and sort of go, I think I'm feeling this. Is that okay? I don't understand where this is coming from. Or in one of the novellas, the flashback that I sent to you to read, he's really conflicted about something, but all he has is a sore stomach. And is this woman that he grew up with says, it's because of this. You're feeling guilty because of this, and you think you should do that. And he's like,
I related to that. I really liked that little short story. It made me choose him as some of it anyway, as the background for my D&D character for the Dungeons & Dragons campaign. I already liked him in that sort of sense, and I liked the idea of someone that doesn't really know what's right or wrong, and trying to figure out who he can trust to be that for him. But also that, how he got there and that background thing, I was like, this is cool, this is interesting. And I related to that poor bastard, because there are times where, I have perhaps the physical consequences of certain emotions, but I'm not necessarily 100% aware that that's where they come from.
Yeah. You got a sore stomach, or you tense shoulders.
Yeah.
But
I feel really sore in my neck. Oh wait, is it just because I was sleeping funny, or have I been feeling weighed down by the responsibility of doing this? Oh wait, yeah, it has been a stressful time, and I have been doing...
And the body kind of knows, but...
There's a disconnect, which, once you become aware of it, it's interesting to try and figure out ways around it.
Cool. Do you think that it can work that a particular physical symptom, you can be like, aha, I'm stressed? Or...
It can be helped. I try not to be definite about it, because I know that then what happens to normal people that see that connection more clearly is that they will decide that, oh, I'm depressed right now. But actually what they've done is forget to eat breakfast.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And if they'd only, because they were busy and they forgot, they're feeling that kind of little dip in energy that they've come to associate with depression. Therefore, oh, I'm depressed. Oh, nothing goes right for me. I'm depressed again, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah.
But actually, if, they'd woken up 10 minutes early and had time to eat a nice breakfast, they wouldn't have felt that and they wouldn't have thought they were depressed.
Well, it's like if you woke up with a hangover, but somehow you didn't know that alcohol caused that, and you're like,
Right.
I feel terrible. Something must be wrong in my soul.
So I'm trying not to be too dogmatic about it,
Yeah.
but on the other side, I'm trying to be a little bit more. Maybe it's more than just a physical feeling.
Mm-hmm.
What if this is tied to something else that I'm not in touch with?
Something else I like about Amos that comes out a few times is he has an incredible moral code. For someone who's such a sociopath who will, kill people without a particular care, he has very fierce loyalty to his chosen family, to his people, which is something I value enormously and appreciate seeing. But he also really particularly cares for people who've been fucked over by a system that he grew up. It's never quite clear, but it seems that he grew up around like brothels and was perhaps the child of a prostitute. I don't know if that's quite made clear. But like in this brothel situation where...
I think it's made clear in that short story, but not in the main books.
Where the kids are being used as well, where pregnant women are being used as like a fetish thing and so on. So he really gets that and has compassion for that. This is all in Baltimore, where it's like the rawest of things. It's like The Wire on steroids. And he has this line like, when people like question what he knows about the world and so on, he's like, everywhere is Baltimore. Like, because human nature in its rawest form is beneath all of these extra levels of civility that we put on top.
Yeah.
He's always seeing the Baltimore in everything that's happening. But anyway, one of the episodes that really struck me was, I can't quite remember which character he's talking to, but he kind of does this chummy, friendly thing about this guy. I think it's it's either the child of this guy or there's a child involved, and he's like, it can be, sometimes guys do things. Maybe they get drunk, and it's no big deal. We all make mistakes. He's like, no. It's like, yeah, but, no one would blame you if, you got in a certain state and these things happen. And I can't remember if it's about, like, sexually abusing a child or, like, beating a child, but it's like building up. It's like, that can happen. I think it is about sexual abuse. That can happen. And we all do things, but, sometimes they can be one-offs, and it doesn't make you a bad person. And the guy says, I think it does. I think it does make you a bad person to do that. And Amos is like, good, I'm glad you said that, because otherwise I was going to beat you to death with a crowbar. It was a test. And there's something so appealing about the raw, I don't know if justice is the word, but that's what it feels like, right? Where if for all that I believe in an appropriate judicial system and innocent till proven guilty, there's also the raw human justice that if you see someone who has abused a child, the impulse is often like, I'm going to beat the shit out of you, you're a dead man. And there's something about the rawness of that which is very appealing. I don't know what I would be like in that scenario. So far I'm not a killer of men or women or people. As opposed to flies.
The shadow comes out.
Not a killer of humans, but I don't know. I don't know if that speaks to the dark side of me that wants to see a kind of fucking clear-sighted justice where I guess maybe many people, but I crave a clarity of honor and justice in the world that I often don't see. And, most of the time I don't live up to myself. But when I see it, I'm like, that's it. That's real. I respect this. I want this. Because I think it does make you a bad person if you fucking abuse a child.
Well, you don't... for many reasons. But one of the reasons is that there is such a thing as free will. You can deny an impulse which to be evil, though it might not feel like it. You got enough... There's no one that doesn't know that molesting a child is, like, wrong. There's no one, like, that does it that thinks this is fine. They know it's wrong. They choose to follow their instinct and do not hear that little voice. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are people that think, no, I should be able to rape all the kids I want.
Maybe the true psychopath, sociopath, I don't know.
But I have a feeling that most people know that it's wrong. They just choose to skip that. But you can. Funnily enough, there is some evidence that most pedophiles don't act on it. That there are more people than we think there are that are attracted to children, but they get really depressed about it because they can't talk to anyone about it, but they don't act on it.
But and in many aspects of life, I think that you can have these attractions or fascinations with things that you then don't act on. Maybe it's violence of some kind, and maybe it's sexual. But we seem to have demonized the idea that you can have thoughts which are unacceptable. That you could suddenly, like, say if you see a picture of a young person and you're like, whoa, they're hot, and then someone says they're 15, and suddenly you're a monster. But the reality was that you saw a being aesthetically that wasn't like you're about to approach them or make a move, or it wasn't fetishizing that they were super young. You just saw something beautiful and appreciated it. I guess maybe there was more space in the past with the idea of, like, more in an artistic way of painting, like, these young muses of some kind, or to appreciate that there is a great beauty to adolescence. It doesn't mean that you then go and pound that, but it shouldn't be demonized that you can see the beauty in things and in people.
But also, like, some things can't be helped, right? Like, you might have feelings or desires which are, by society standards, wrong. Trying to make people feel ashamed of that isn't going to remove the feelings. Telling them it's okay to have the feeling, but it's not okay to act on it, is a much better message. I think it would let some people kind of be more honest about some aspects of themselves, without removing the truth that it's still not okay to follow through.
I mean, like, in a less, like, disturbing, like, moving away from, like, the sex stuff, but there are times where you just want to fucking punch people in the face.
Yeah.
And you don't do it. Like, I think we can understand that more easily because it's less, like, laden with sort of horror and the tales of abuse. And, well, to some extent, these could be tales of abuse, but we feel violent impulses, or we feel an impulse to say something really horrible to some people, and we don't do it because we can think through that, it's not a good thing to do, is it? But I think it. Yeah. Well, that's fine.
Well, some people moralize even that. Like, I've had people look at me like I shat in the middle of the room when I said, I wouldn't be mad if that person got run over.
Yeah. Well, because they're horrified that they might think that too, and they don't want to...
I think so. I think it's a shadow thing.
Yeah.
Because they secretly also wish they could think that out loud. But whatever they were brought up in, it's like, no, you don't say that. You can't say that. I'm like, I'm not going to run them over. And probably if they actually did get run over in front of me, my human empathy would be to, like, assist them and save them. But in an abstract fashion, removed from the reality of it, I'm able to wish them ill and not be ashamed of it.
I think that it's enriching to have an Amos character and other characters, like in The Expanse, in your sense of what the world is and who people can be. To think, like, I feel like in a way he is a bit of an avatar in my head now. Like, what would Amos say about this? And just cut through the bullshit, because it increases your range of what kinds of people there are. And for him and his crew, because they accept him and they care about him, they take him on his own terms, which is one of the most beautiful things I think that people can do, or you could feel like taken on your own terms. They're like, there's him and he's that way and he's our guy. But that's expanded their sense of what people can be, to have that really there. I think it's like it's one of the big barriers to people often understanding different cultures or backgrounds, is that they don't have a real person frame of reference, because they're cut off from it, or they've cut themselves off from it.
I really enjoyed that character. It's certainly an interesting thing to explore and to think about. He's one of my favorites. But funny enough, I think one of the reasons I really fell in love with the series, and it's something I've noticed in most of the good media that I like recently is that it's got some really strong women characters.
Oh, hell yeah.
And actually strong women. Like, not Hollywood's version of what a strong woman should be, which is just like what we thought male heroes should be in the 80s turned into a woman.
Mm-hmm.
But an actual person that is intelligent and has a strong strength of character and personality and gets shit done. In particular, the two I'm thinking of is Christian
Is sort of Christian Avasarala.
and I forgot her name, the Beltaloda one.
Oh, drummer.
Yeah, so the
one
of the
eye
leaders
makeup.
of the Belters.
She's so beautiful.
She's amazing.
I mean,
totally in love with that character.
It's not just the look; it's like her strength of character. She's such a compelling figure.
Yeah. She's super strong woman, strong leader. Like, knows what she wants. I really enjoy characters like that because it's. I don't know. There's something really relatable because I think, in some ways, I'm closer to that in personal. Like, I'm closer to a strong woman than I am to Conan. There's a part of me that really like I have no problem, for example, putting myself in the shoes of a female character, protagonist. When I watch Westworld, I am Dolores.
I wonder if us as men. Are we? I don't have female friends who've been watching The Expanse or reading The Expanse, so I don't know. But to me, these seem like very well written women. But then I guess I wouldn't know. To an extent, I'm never going to know. Is it just our idea of what compelling women are? Well, I don't know.
Maybe, but I mean, George R. Martin was asked how he writes women so well by women. I think it was a women interviewer.
One, he's obsessed with their nipples,
and well, his and he does write them pretty well compared to the TV series. Then it makes basically, if you're a strong woman, you're evil in the TV series, or you will fall to evil eventually. That's the message. But in the books, women are people, and that's what he said. Like, well, I just write them as people. Because I mean, there are some differences. But they're mostly cosmetic or brought on by society. But there are some differences. Let's be fair to the biology of sex. But it's mostly, if you start with a person, you take away the accoutrements of how they were brought up and all the other details. You just write a person. And I think that's the best starting point for writing anyone that is different from you. To forget about the differences first, and like think of them as people, as consciousness, as an intelligent thing.
I think that one of the weird things about how badly women have often been portrayed in like movies and things is this. It isn't like I think many people's actual experience where women can actually be incredibly powerful in many different ways in our actual lives, and that the respect that, say, I don't know, especially say an older woman can have in a family or a local community. Yeah. You don't fuck with her.
No, she's the actual boss.
Yeah, she's the real, and we know this, and yet in the representations in TV and film, it seems so simplified and doesn't pay any attention to the true role and power that I mean, maybe I'm being naive, and maybe it's because I think that compared to many people, I'm not a misogynist. I generally respect women.
But it's good to see that in media, because I think we've been seeing a lot of the other overcompensation of, like, let's redo this movie entirely with female characters, which is, I mean, not a bad idea. Fine, whatever. Like, I mean, I'd rather they come up with a new story, but it's not bad in and of itself. But then just kind of, I don't know, just it doesn't feel genuine or authentic when like it's done by the sort of a paint by the numbers decision of women are cool now because it's fashionable to like women. Therefore, let's make this in a woman version, as opposed to like let's tell a cool story with cool characters. Where I much more resonate with that where it didn't matter. Like you could change some of those characters into men. You could change some of the main characters into women. They're just cool because they're well written, have interesting motivation, and you know, I don't know.
There's a problem, I think, if you write any character just through a single lens, where you think everything that they would do is determined by one aspect of them, be it that they're a woman or a man, or if they're gay. I mean, especially if they're gay, like suddenly everything is about, like, as a gay character they would do this. I'm like, people are not just one fucking thing. Dude, I mean, like, some of it's going to come out that there are particular things that would be relevant only if they are in this particular, you know, if they are, one part of them is this thing. But other than that, you know, it's just what, like you say, start with a person.
Yeah.
Avasarala is so cool.
Yeah, she's cool.
And she's even more foul-mouthed in the books. It's well worth.
It's amazing to see in the books and movies. I mean, like, in reality, I think she's Iranian.
I think the actress is. I think she's Iranian.
But the character is Indian, right? Did I get that correctly?
I think so. Like of background, yeah. The character, I think. I mean, she wears these beautiful saris and
yeah,
so.
I mean, maybe that doesn't matter in the future.
Well, that's kind of the thing. Like, I guess it's more like that's part of her legacy and her inheritance. But those sorts of nations no longer matter. It's like it's Earth and it's Mars and whatever. And she has all this power, and yet it's so fascinating to get into her head to see how she is struggling to do it. Like, she can seem like such a monster at certain times, especially when they do this great thing where the characters you know and love, suddenly they meet each other and they're like, and you're like, no, because I've been inside all of your heads.
Yeah.
And so I understand and I care, but now they're clashing. Yeah. And she can seem like such a... I said I wouldn't, but I will. She can be like such a hard ass, such an incredible like manipulator as well. And yet she, kind of like Holden with more political savvy, is trying to do the best she can for humanity. And the weight of that is colossal. They do this funny thing in the TV show where they like see her being corrupted by power. Oddly, that doesn't happen in the books. That's not...
I don't remember that.
That's not the story.
Not truly.
Where her husband... Well, her husband is worried about her just becoming obsessed with keeping power.
Right.
But that's not what plays out in the books, which is sort of an interesting distinction.
Because I think the actual character isn't like that. I mean, it's not, people might worry about that, and they're wondering if the motivation is just to hold on to power. But the reason she's trying to hold on to power is because she thinks that she's the one holding it all together.
Yeah, probably Putin thinks that too. Like, it depends who's doing it. And we fall into a trap when we watch a show and we've seen who our hero is. We don't care what rules they break. It's like watching, you know, James Bond or something, and we're like, well, we know he's doing the right thing, even though everyone else thinks he's a baddie, and you know, they think that he's gone rogue. Right.
Well, because we get to see their more intimate moments where you can see that they're genuinely worried about what's going to happen to people. If I mean, I imagine it would be a lot harder to hate Putin, if we saw him in moments where, like, you know, in his private moments and, you know, at home going, what am I going to do? The Russian people need help. Like, and you see that he genuinely, I don't know if he does, but if you saw that, then, you know, him poisoning the opposition leader would feel more like, oh, he's just taking care of business.
Why? Like, I saw this mentioned, like, this will probably date quite quickly, but like, why is Novichok, I don't know how it's pronounced, why is that their go-to poison when it doesn't seem to really kill anybody? It just fucks them up.
I think it's more of a warning.
Okay.
I don't think it's about killing that guy, because also apparently I was reading that, like, the news is making him out to be like the opposition that could take on Putin, but actually he's not that powerful or well known. I think it's more of if you fuck with us, this is what happens.
Navalny is like a tolerable thorn in the side.
Yeah.
He really doesn't have much power and is a bit of a loon in some ways as well. And they allow him to have a certain amount of free reign. But I guess every now and again you would be interesting to know if this poisoning was something that Putin actually authorized, but more often in the Russian world, in that system, it's different competing agencies that are trying to fulfill the imagined wishes of the top.
That's one of the dangers with a mafia style. This is the second time I brought up a Mitchell and Webb skit during this type of podcast. There's a Mitchell and Webb skit where there's like an evil overlord being vague about his wishes.
Yeah,
Because,
yeah.
that's the way you have plausible deniability in a criminal organization. You go, we'll just have to wait for them to have a, an unexpected accident. And it's like a command to murder.
Yeah.
But you haven't said, I want you to murder him. So if someone overhears, you can't, it's not evidence in jail, right?
But it might also not even be as clear as that, just going, he's becoming more frustrating.
Right.
And then people go, let's poison him. Maybe that wasn't the order.
Want someone rid me of this troublesome priest, type of thing. Mm-hmm. People took that literally and murdered the Archbishop of Canterbury. And it's one of the Blackadders that happens to Blackadder. Mm-hmm. Where his father, the king, is explaining to someone what happened when someone said, "Won't someone rid me of this troublesome priest?" Mm-hmm. And as he's explaining that, two crusaders walk in and hear, "Won't someone rid me of this troublesome priest?"
And off they go.
And off they go to murder Blackadder.
Oops. No. So in the world of the Expanse 2, we have some imperial shit going on. That at a certain point, a lot of new worlds become available.
Yes.
And people go mad. And one of the
which trivializes the conflict over Mars and the Belt.
Yeah. Suddenly a bigger picture opens up and it's like, what do we do about this? And some of the fascinating, very human things come up. The Belter factions start being like, no, we don't want to settle on planets. That's not who we are. Belta Loda. This is us. We should maybe talk later about the Belter language. It's pretty cool, pretty interesting. And others are like, finally, we can have our own place. And we can enrich ourselves through whatever the resources of these different planets are. So then their identity is fragmented. And you have the people like the UN and Mars going, we want control over this, and deciding that they are the ones, as the existing authorities, to grant charter rights to the settlement of these worlds. Is this so familiar, isn't it, about like from our own history of like declaring that we have this government has the right to say who can do this and who can do that, and then people conflicting over it. And in the most recent like TV season, shit goes down on this one planet where Belter people have settled. They want to mine the minerals and metals there to enrich themselves, but the UN has sent a militarized force. It's not even really the UN, it's like the private company that has the right, that's been granted the charter right to develop this world, and the settlers are like, we're here already.
Yeah.
And it's funny that it's different to the other seasons, right? That it's all just on this planet. It's not like swashbuckling through space.
Yeah.
And I feel, to be that guy, I feel like the book was better in this case.
Okay.
It made things more exciting. There was more, I felt it was more energetic and dynamic than the show, where at times early on I was a little bored in that season. It didn't seem as dramatic or compelling, or as it didn't have as much variety as before. Maybe I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to take it on its own terms. And we see this play out, and trying to understand both sides of it. We're like, okay, you just turned up and claimed this, but these people with a charter are now turning up and claiming this. And the shit goes down between them, like guerrilla sort of fighting happens. There's shitheads on both sides. And Holden is essentially sent in to try and deal with it, because it's known he could only be impartial because he's such a fool in the eyes of the politicians. They're like, this guy, then people know he's not beholden to anyone because he can't keep his mouth shut, and he's got this silly, unbending moral code. And I was sending you in as a puppet, you idiot, on you go. But what plays out there's a final kind of showdown. I thought was a really striking thought about humanity and what civilization even is, where the guy that we've seen as the bad guy, who's the head of the people with the charter, is confronting Holden. It's like, what are you talking about? Law and order and justice. This is the frontier. Civilization is what happens when people have a post office and like a communication system and an economy, and things are settled. That's where people like you come in with your ideas of justice and morality and all of this. The frontier of new raw nature and trying to tame it, where everything is in flux, needs people like me. We're the ones who set the ground. We're not useful in civilization, but we're the cold-blooded bastards that you need to establish something new.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to think about that. I don't know if
it's a powerful argument. He might not be right, but it's an interesting argument to think about. Because those people thrive in those situations, and it's difficult for the more poised people to make a dent in those situations. Doesn't mean that, like, basically, would we still be able to settle the frontier if assholes didn't exist? Probably. That's one of the other things that assholes are able to get away with. The argument that they're required, that we need them. But the reason that we usually need assholes is to fight other assholes.
Yeah.
If everyone was cool, you might not need the person that is willing to murder everyone, because you need him to fight the other guy that's willing to murder everyone.
They could have done a lot more with a sit down and like some rational people talking, and that isn't what happened on that place.
But it has a lot more flexibility in the frontier. It's a crazy place. I also liked that season because it really brought home, a spoiler alert, this concept of the alien civilizations like basically being a graveyard. That these powerful creatures that had ungodly powerful technology that these humans are now exploiting didn't survive. That they still fell prey to war and something. We don't know for sure what happened, but you get the sense from hints of the story that they were defeated and they no longer exist. And the idea that someone so far ahead of you didn't make it is haunting.
Yeah. Because
we keep telling ourselves that if only we're able to reach this level of advancement, we'll rise up above, our petty like squabbles and things like that, and we'll be able to, to just go further than we ever gone before. But to have this haunting example that even someone that was a million years ahead of you didn't make it.
I think that really grabbed you, right? I think you texted me and was like, finally, I'm sold on the Expanse. Like, this bleak fucking insight was the thing that did it for you.
Yeah, it was delivered really well. It builds up to it. The crescendo to those realizations is done in a way that really got me. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know what happened, knowing that it probably wouldn't matter if you knew what happened, but you need to understand why it happened. It's just to me it drew me in quite a bit.
It's really funny to be talking about, only up to, so it was 4 seasons, right?
Yeah.
So far.
Yeah, 4 seasons so far. And you're on book 6?
Oh no, 8. There's 8.
8.
There's
sorry.
8, and there will be a 9th.
Whew.
Book 5, season 5. A lot of shit's going to get very real, and I hope they've really pulled it off well. I think they filmed it and it's in post production, and they have a slight issue because one of the actors is in a Me Too situation where a lot of things have been. The guy who plays Alex the pilot.
Okay. Yeah, I remember you.
It's quite. I mean, it's really sad, and they're doing an investigation. It all seems like they're being very serious and thorough about it. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I've seen a lot of the screenshots and stuff, and the guy seems like a massive creep.
Never good.
I mean, I don't know how much further it goes from massive creep, and I don't know what the dividing lines are. They're like, yeah, the guy's a creep and a cunt, and I wouldn't give him a job. I don't know what happens next in this case.
Right.
I imagine he'll be replaced. I don't know how they'll do it.
Yeah, hopefully. I would rather have a wink, this is the same guy, just a different actor type of situation, than writing out a character that's important.
Yeah, I hope they do that because the character's really important. He should be there. It's a shame because the dude portrays the character very well. Like, I really like that character and the way that he's brought to life on the screen. But so I hope if they replace him, they bring in someone who can still capture that essence somehow. But yeah, it's a weird thing, isn't it? They replaced Avasarala's husband. Did you notice the actor? It was kind of quietly done that her husband, who's like the
Don't
poetry
remember that.
literature professor.
Yeah. I probably noticed at the time, but that hasn't been saved
Yeah.
or something.
Theirs is quite, and I enjoy their relationship. It's a bit more intense on the screen, like in a bad way, that as compared to what you read. But that he's this guy who's a literature professor doing his thing, and that she's one of the most powerful people in the world. But he means everything to her. And well, not everything, I suppose, because she prioritizes her work more. But he has that very special place, and she admires and respects the thing that he does, even though it's so small compared to what she does. And I guess I like that because maybe it gives me a little hope that just doing the small things well is also valuable. You don't have to be the big...
Well, you need all the pieces, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think just because something has a larger imprint on the universe doesn't mean it's more important.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if you're doing a small piece, it might mean you're more replaceable, but that piece still needs to be made by someone. And if you're doing it well, why couldn't it be? Well, why isn't what you do important? I think it is.
Yeah. And it's nice to see also her sort of more gentle side, especially with her grandchildren, because she's such the hard ass. She's so impressive, but she's so sweet with her family.
I love that she's the consummate politician, but a good one. Sort of like I guess you could debate. I was going to say like a female Churchill, but people think Churchill was terrible, and some people think Churchill was terrible. But he thought he was doing what he needed to do. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So he made some mistakes. He was probably racist, but he got some shit done that needed to be done because of the way he was. And she's got that same streak of, I think I know what needs to be done for people to survive or exist, for society to continue, and I'm going to do it. Which is admirable, because it takes strength of character to be that much of a bastard. Mm-hmm. Not because you want to be, but because you think you need to be. It's an interesting concept, I think.
It's also, it's nice, she does things, I don't think it's shown up in the show so much yet, but she does very kind things to people, for people that she cares about. But she doesn't want any praise. She's like, yeah, get to fuck. But she'll arrange things such that people who did well, who served her well, who came through are rewarded. But she wants none of the praise for that. She's like, fuck you. Which I kind of like. Let's talk about the social system. Some of it. On Earth, there's a thing called, I think it's called basic. Your basic, which is universal basic income. That if you don't work, you have a guaranteed situation. But their view is that it's not turned out so well, that people on basic are still pretty looked down on. That they're just doing the simplest survival things, and it kind of sucks. And the Belters and the Martians look down on them as these lazy, free ride people. But close up, they're also not particularly happy in that scenario. They don't really have the space to grow and be who they want to be.
Well, they don't exactly have a lavish lifestyle.
Not at all, no.
It's truly basic. The basic income. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like poverty level sustenance, right?
Yeah, which is, I guess that's not the dream of what a universal basic income would be.
No, that
where it should be like not poverty level, but like stuff is covered, and if you live frugally, you'll get by. But the impetus, like the desire would be there to do more.
Yeah.
But that, like, they're not painting a rosy picture there. Even though it's in place, this basic income.
Yeah. But it's interesting that they, regardless of whether it works well or not, the story recognizes that a world that far advanced would need to do that. Because there's not going to be enough stuff for everyone to do. Mm-hmm. But that you can't have, I don't know how many billions of people trying to figure out how to eat, because that's how you get a revolution. So in this version of fiction, they give them just enough so that they don't really band together and overthrow the establishment. Mm-hmm. I think a true universal basic income would be more than that. The goal would be for it to be more than basic sustenance. It would need to be basically raising the middle class to be the default. Mm-hmm. That should be the aim of society. at least in the face of complete automatization.
Yeah, it's difficult.
It's a difficult
more
word.
whiskey.
More whiskey. Because
Automation. We can say automation.
Yeah. In the face of that, we're gonna need to figure out what to do with people, and hopefully we go with the more aspirational version of that, as opposed to basically the more capitalist. Give them just enough so that they don't come with pitchforks. But in this world, that's kind of what they did.
What's interesting too is how the different identities of our three main groups are clearly defined in relation to the others, as in we're not that. And the Martians are much more militaristic, because that's how essentially a Martian discovered faster than light travel. I don't remember if it's faster than light.
No,
it's not faster than light, but it is much faster.
Yeah.
So it's a certain kind of fusion, I think, in fact.
It's a very, very efficient drive system which allows acceleration at multiple Gs.
Yeah, the Epstein Drive. They didn't portray it well in the show, but because it was sort of weird. But the guy who invented it, fuck it, let's just get pissed. The guy who invented it
becomes easier as you have more.
That's what she said. Or he, oh dear. It all feels much worse when it's on camera compared to when we're just podcasting.
When I was editing, I noticed how drunk I looked in 4K. But I also noticed that I don't know if it's been locked down or if I've just reached a certain age. I feel like I permanently look tired. And I just have to get past that, like the vanity of it.
Beauty filters.
Yeah.
So the Epstein Drive is created by Solomon Epstein. I think that's his full name. But he doesn't really know it's going to work. Like, he's just tinkered with his ship, and he's like, let's give this a go. And it goes so fast, so quickly, so well, he wasn't ready. And he's stuck, pinned to his chair by the G-forces, that he can't stop the ship. And he just blasts into, the ether until he dies from the force of it. Yeah. It's like, what a tragicomic situation. I don't feel like it was clear what the hell in weird flashbacks in the show. I don't think that was handled so well.
I got it from the show, so maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't as done as well as the book, but I got it. I got the concept of someone inventing the next big leap, but not being able to benefit from it because it killed them. Yeah. Tragic, but funny in a way.
Yeah, and because a Martian invented that, suddenly Mars became more important because they could have the superior ships. They built up the superior navy, and that's how they could claim their independence. And so for them, not being the vassal of Earth is key, and by having discipline and the military stuff is so important to them, saying they're not Earth on their like basic income, all these freeloaders, losers, and Earth is defined as like, no, we're like the cradle of civilization. We're not you just out there with your horrible, harsh military system. And the Belters are people like, we're just fucked, like, by everybody. Like, the thing is that we're caught in between, but we're actually essential. We're the ones who are shipping ice to Mars. We're the ones who are shipping supplies back and forth. Yeah. We are the lifeblood. We're the arterial system of this system. And we are treated like crap, like freaks. Yeah. And all these differences between them that are really about what we're not. In contrast, that I think is so true in so much of how we relate to each other.
It's a reflection of how societies end up working, where whatever's in charge, whether it's the oligarchy or whether it's your brain and your body. For example, our consciousness in our brain thinks it's the most important thing in our body, right? Mm-hmm. The kidney doesn't get much of a choice of where it goes, of what we drink, but without it, couldn't survive. The brain, in all its might, in all its ability to recite poetry, without both kidneys, dies very quickly. And we have the same attitude. Governments end up fetishizing the power structure, whatever it is, whether it's a group of people, whether it's one person, like whoever is making decisions thinks they're the most important thing there is. But without the support structure, none of it could exist. And I think it's an interesting thing to think about.
And I think that they do think about it nicely and interestingly in this show, where it's got a bit of the vibe of The Wire, in that it shows these different sides who seem like enemies if you only see it from one perspective, and then you get to see the other side and you're like, these people are very similar, and I understand where they're coming from and what their priorities are. And
it becomes an ecosystem where whichever way they've become because of each other is reliant upon each other. Like, to take The Wire as an example, the cops like to, look down upon the drug dealers, but actually none of them would have a job if the drug dealers weren't there. Like, that extensive militaristic police force exists because there's the other thing, right? Their purpose, their life essence is to fight this side. If the side didn't exist, who are they? And you get that as well, where they're in opposition, but they become interdependent, I think.
Yeah, they do, and they determine each other in this sort of weird yin-yang thing that's not so well balanced, I guess. Things are going to change in future seasons where there has to be an identity crisis because the situation changes so much that reinvents people. But some I'm trying not to give anything away, that causes problems because some people don't want to let go of that identity. This is the true us, which was based on a situation that no longer exists. And there was a passage I really liked of where Avasarala is questioning herself, and she's like, do I still know? Is my sense of reality real, or am I just an old politician making decisions based on the life and realities that have existed before but don't exist now? Can I keep doing this or not? And that's where it's so unsettling, where suddenly you're not wise anymore because everything's changed so much that your map of the terrain is wrong because the terrain has changed.
It's an interesting thing to face as well, that we are a product of our upbringing, and so we can become unfashionable in a way. We can no longer be useful because what made us be useful as a product of our times was being connected to what people really thought because we went to school or connected or did something. And now we've been in power for so long we're no longer fed into that system, whereas the new generation is. It's an interesting concept, and I think people really struggle with the idea that they become obsolete.
I think there has to be more awareness of, and I think Avasarala herself sort of proves this, that she can have that worry, and it's probably healthy to have that worry, but there is the deeper wisdom of what it is to be a human, which is what I don't think that we, in our contemporary society, we don't seem to value. We still have the idea of like you could be a party elder or something within politics, and yet that still seems a bit too tied to current trends. Yeah. I think that it's crucial that we value the wisdom of the intelligent, smart people who've shown themselves to be an asset to our community over a long time, who simply have a better perspective, the same way that when you're in your 30s or 40s and you look at someone who's 18 going through stuff that you've seen and you've done, it's different for them in some ways. They've got Snapchat, they've got whatever the fuck that they've got that's different. You're like, you just have that other perspective of like, I can see a bit more. It doesn't mean you're wrong or your experience is invalid, and it doesn't mean I can tell you the right thing to do, but I have a bit more perspective and maybe my input would be useful.
And it doesn't have to be, like, you don't have to become obsolete. There's a couple of interesting examples, like there was a recent primary. So a senator in America, Ed Markey, longtime serving senator, got primaried by his own party by a Kennedy.
Okay.
So the Kennedy was the young guy. But funny enough, Kennedy's the more conservative one. And the whole campaign was, it's not the age of the person, because Kennedy was trying to push like I'm the fresh blood. But actually his ideas were more conservative. And the whole campaign for Ed Markey, who he's just won, by the way.
Okay. Did he have to have Kennedy assassinated? Isn't that
no,
the way
he didn't. And funny enough, it's the first defeat for Kennedy in Massachusetts ever. Okay. That guy's never going to live it down at the family dinner. But some of the other people that were supporting this older guy were kind of going, it's not the age of the person, it's the age of the ideas that's relevant. This was one of the co-authors of the Green New Deal.
Uh-huh.
The Green New Deal is... You know what the New Deal is?
What, the original FDR?
Yeah, FDR
Yeah.
coming forward with a plan to basically revitalize the economy after the Depression.
Sure.
Yeah. So the Green New Deal is a new version of that tries to also factor in climate change.
Mm-hmm.
The co-author, other than Alessandro Ocasio-Cortez, the new face of the Democratic Party, is this old guy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like being old doesn't have to be a death sentence for relevance. It's the age of the ideas.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking to my own grandfather, who at the age of 85 signed up to a digital photography course.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the eldest person there by 50 years, I think. And he was really trying to keep up.
Yeah.
You know, there's a difference in some people allow themselves to become irrelevant.
I think that we're talking it too interlocking, or like it's a Venn diagram thing, that one is about keeping up with the realities of now, which is cool and valid, and I definitely try and keep tabs on myself. That I think it's okay that I'm not prepared to learn Snapchat. But I don't want to be the person who's just horrified by the new technology or whatever it is. But the other side is like the deeper wisdom that's the human wisdom that isn't simply about like the latest tech or the latest problems in the specifics. It's more about maybe the deeper wisdom of what it is to be human, about understanding the emotional landscape that we go through and understanding the role. Maybe over time you've seen so much conflict that you are more capable of resolving that conflict, whatever the specifics are.
Yeah.
And that wisdom doesn't seem to have a lot of place. Like we have these weird institutions for that. Like I think the idea of the House of Lords tries to play out this idea in the UK that like these wise elder statesmen and women, but really that's not true. It's just like bonuses and awards for people who've done well to whoever's in power at the moment. But in more traditional societies, and I think to some extent just in the way that not every family, but lots of families, like a lot of the times you're going to listen to what your grandparent has to say about something, you know, as long as they're not like a crazy dickhead or like super racist or whatever. But if they're telling you maybe about what it is to overcome an obstacle and understand the periods of your life, or maybe to do with love or the pursuit of happiness or family or loyalty, they have something to offer.
Yeah.
And maybe again, it's like whatever we were riffing on earlier about that human level, about say like women having a lot more influence in life than there is seen on the screen. We have that reality, but maybe not at the bigger societal level. Sadly.
All good drama is able to tap into some of these primal, basic, this is what humanity is all about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is something the Expanse does well. It taps into some very, very primary bits of who we are and how we exist.
I think what I really dig about it, one of the things I really dig about it is that there's all of that depth and they're not shoving it down your throat.
Yeah.
And especially when reading it, like I said, there's these little gems of insight that are not like, they don't feel out of place, but it's also not going, we are seriously talking about the human condition. Yeah. It's just these little shards of truth where you're like, oh my God, this is so real.
It's beneath the surface, you know, like you see behind the veil, but it's not like a, you know, sort of giant neon billboard of think about death and the meaning of existence. Like it's not
like the dreadful Star Trek Discovery where they have the voiceovers going, and the thing I guess I learned most of all is that you need to fuck off. Don't tell me what I need to take from this. Show me what it could be, and I'll react and see what I think about it.
Yeah.
Those fucking things. What else could I say about The Expanse?
I don't know.
There's a whole extra bunch of books that I can't quite talk about. But there's like the creation of a new empire that happens that try and forces itself on people that seems like benevolent, and yet ultimately you have no choice but to say yes to it. There's the playing out, because at one point, it's not exactly, I don't know how they'll play this out on the show, but in a really weird moment, there's like a 30-year gap between two books. And you're like, what?
You mentioned that.
Usually not down with that, but I think they've played it quite well.
I wonder if they'll keep that in the series and how they'll deal with that, or if it's like, no, we have to keep our young actors looking hot. Like, we can't do that.
Because then there's the question of coming to terms with who you are at that stage of life. Are you going to retire from trying to fight the good fight? Haven't you earned that? Or are you still going to follow that mission? Is that what this is about?
I mean, in some ways you have earned that, but I think there's almost a duty when you realize that, do not go quietly into that good night. Like, sometimes you are needed. As an example, I'm thinking of Bernie Sanders. He could have retired a long time ago. Like, he did really well. Like, he fought the good fight. It wasn't always recognized. It wasn't always rewarded. But there was no other progressive alternative in this election cycle. If he hadn't gone up, there would have been literally no one that was truly on the side of at least trying to say, I am only for the people.
You think Andrew Yang wouldn't count in that?
He was still a little too new agey, corporatist, capitalist. Like, he was okay, but some of his ideas don't reflect that genuine. It doesn't matter what the system wants or what is most effective. That's not what's important. How do we help people? And
this is
that coming from that side might be too idealistic. It might not work out, but you need that side. You need a representative of that side. You need to have that aspect of politics, even when it's too idealistic.
He's the James Holden of the the situation.
And funnily enough, in America, like, it's not too idealistic, because what he's preaching is what other countries have accepted for ages. Like, he's not too far. Like, there are people that maybe are too far on the side of the idealism, but he, funnily enough, I don't think he is. He's seen that way in America because of the Overton. You know what the Overton window is?
You need to remind me. I do.
It's basically the framework by which politics is defined as, this is what's extreme on one side, this is what extreme on the other, and this is the middle. But that shifts.
Right.
One way or another.
The sense of the spectrum.
Yes. So, when the Tea Party came out in America, the extremist right wing, then suddenly the whole, like, over a period of time, it shifted America politics even more rightwards. So now what should really be center is seen as the extreme left.
Yeah.
So that's the Overton window. The kind of spectrum by which we decide what's on one side or on the other and what's in the middle for politics can shift one way or another depending on the attitudes of society over time.
Or the media, to be honest. But
so America is in a situation where it has the two main parties as a bi-party system are center-right and kind of middle to extreme right.
Yeah. I think, like, reading a world like The Expanse is sometimes we want to read the thing of be in the world of, like, what could be in a good way. And yet this is much more checkered. And yet it still seems better. I don't know if it's maybe just because we're in the minds of people. We're sometimes in the minds of shitheads, for sure. And yet there's such... I don't know, maybe it's more compelling just because it's different. But to escape into a world where there are slightly better problems or different problems and it's not just the same thing being hashed out again and again, it's sort of liberating just to have changed up, what's on the table for discussion.
Well, it's kind of... Because I think I do feel we're a little bit stuck over some basic shit that we should have figured out a long time ago. At the moment, we're in a strange period of history where, we're yearning for the Star Trek future, or at least I am. But it might be more of an Expanse future or more of a altered carbon future. We'll have to see. But at least it would be new. It would be a new challenge to try and tackle and fight for. It feels a bit dated to fight for every race to be seen as equal and not be murdered by police. You're like, but that's what our grandfathers were fighting for. Like, or for an acceptable working week and work-life balance. Like, are we going back to children working in mines? What year is this?
What year is this?
I think media and stories about new challenges to face as society can be really exciting, even when the story doesn't necessarily go well. Because, you know, I don't know, the escapism of fighting the good fight for something new, I think it's interesting.
There's also some eternal kind of human realities in it that I'm drawn to, like the story of Detective Miller. Where, maybe you're, I don't know if you're making that expression because of one particular moment, but like it happens, I don't think it's as clear on screen, but he's given this case to look into, and eventually he looks deep and he gets fascinated by it, but then he's told to just fucking leave it, okay? It was meant to just be a thing to just go through the motions, but he went deep. And he has this horrible moment where like he thinks he's like the hardcore cop, the guy that we all know from noir films, the cop who's pretty gritty, has got an alcohol problem and is really...
He looks like the stereotype of that cop.
And he goes for it. It's got this, you know, innate sense, he's true police kind of vibe. And then he looks around at himself and he's like, they did this to me, and the last two partners I've had, one was an earther that everyone hated, and the other one is someone who's being punished for not sleeping with a superior. Oh my God, I'm the joke of the station. I'm the guy that everyone, that he knows in his head exists but doesn't know it's him, which is the joke, the one who thinks that he's still a big tough cop, but actually is a laughing stock, who isn't as sharp as he used to be. He's just a drunk, and is the joke of the station. He's like, oh my God, that's who I am. Oh, it really rattled me. In a way, like in a sense of compassion for him, but also, I guess that's a fairly primal fear for us in some ways, that everyone's been treating as like, for those who listen to the podcast generally, the person who's been told that she's a really good opera singer, she can't sing at all, and eventually you're gonna get found out. But everyone wanted to be nice, like your friends were like, you're so good, and
yet that joke, once again, spoiler alert, he ceases to exist as himself, but a shadow of what he is gets imprinted into this AI and is able to assert existence and continue
by bit.
The strength of that desire to figure out the puzzle is powerful enough to continue in a sort of immortality for a while. And I found that extremely compelling, the idea of that. Like, it's exciting, it's interesting, because we're eventually going to reach a point where part of our personalities are going to continue to exist past our point of death digitally, because systems will try to replicate us or will store us. And what happens once you're untethered from a physical existence, whether or not your echo will be strong enough to persist, and what it will do past the point of your demise is interesting. Will any of you live on? I don't know. I found that interesting, and it was. I mean, he ends up going in a particular direction eventually, but you know, he's got something he wants to try and do, and he's gonna do it. You know, death be damned.
Yeah. He ends up with a mission, I suppose, something worth living for, something worth dying for. That's always kind of compelling to see on the screen. I don't know if they played it up so much in the show now, but doors and corners. It's kind of that's what you need to look for. I guess it's transitions and the hidden areas.
And he has to reassert himself, because the basic sort of programming of what his consciousness is trapped in.
He's a subroutine within a bigger thing.
Yeah. And it takes real strength of character to override that. That to me came through in the show, and it was touching. You know, like I I was moved by him trying to achieve his mission and then kind of moving on from that.
Yeah, I forgot the name of the actor, and then a friend of mine was watching it after. I've got so many people on The Expanse, I should get some kind of cut, I think. And he was like, "Oh, it's such a babe," and I assumed that he meant Holden. But no, it was this guy. I was like, for God's sake, Mr. Daddy Issues, why does it... Of course it's Miller that you're into, this like horrible washed up guy. It's kind of unsettling. So, would you read the books?
I think I would. Maybe it's a good thing like to try and get into. I don't know if I'd read the books or listen to the books. I think maybe I should try to read. It's been a while since I've tried to read fiction. Mm-hmm. Because the stress of life is such that I struggle to not be focused on the page. I go elsewhere. Whereas with an audiobook, I'm like, if I'm not doing anything else, I'm just listening. I'm almost forced to.
Okay. I found it a wonderful escape. It helped me reconnect with fiction as being an important part of a healthy life. For me, that it was so easy and so fascinating. It got me back into reading fiction because I'd just been so busy with other shit. I don't know about the audiobooks. I think it's an American narrator, and I often find that it doesn't work for me.
It's a mixed bag. It's weird. They're too fake. There's something about their delivery.
It's like an advert.
Yeah. Like you're hearing the latest car wash promotion. Like there's something.
It's a weird association. I mean, they're American authors. It's reasonable their book would be narrated by an American person.
But they're brought up, and I think it's hard to distance yourself from this very artificial. And today on our show we have. It percolates in their day-to-day life, so that, like, they talk like that.
This is a weird thing to say, but like the first 1 or 2 times that I had sex with an American, I was like, oh my God, I'm in a porno. I was like, this is not normal. Like, this is only on screen that I hear this accent in a sexual context. And like, it's happening. This feels, it's an out-of-body experience. Yeah, I'm not saying that British accents are particularly sexy, but I didn't realize until that moment that I had that close association.
And it's not everyone. Some people are wonderful voice actors. I think maybe they should employ more people like that. The Dungeons and Dragons series I've been watching as a way to kind of distance myself from reality. The Dungeon Master, Matt Mercer, is got an American accent, but obviously can do British accents as well. Mm-hmm. But even his American sounding characters, the delivery, it's got depth. The same way that I think one of the epitomes of human civilization is Stephen Fry's narration of Harry Potter. Mm-hmm. It is so compelling for me. Like, listening to that is one of the highlights of being alive.
So I guess the point is not that there's an American accent problem. It's more just the way in which it's been thought that the right way to orate or to tell a story within more of American culture maybe than this culture is to do this sort of over the top, I'm on stage or I'm doing this advert.
Trailer voice.
Trailer voice, and it's like in
one woman's journey.
Like in Russia, they have this sort of contemporary, long-standing practice of like people who will, what's the word, like declamation, where you stand up and do poetry. I might be getting that wrong, but they do it so over the fucking top. I'm like, I can't even. It's like, oh, and then it's melodrama. I don't want that, and especially in a book series and a show, which is gritty and which is real. And what makes it, I think it comes across on screen, and it comes across in the writing, is that these feel like real people because they also have silly jokes, because they also they're in this world with all this tech. And they're like, an alarm goes off and they're just like, what does that mean? And they're like, I hope it doesn't mean anything. It's like, could we get back to the stage where we're not having alarms ringing all the time? Like this sort of silly, playful, fun thing that you would maybe is unrealistic to some extent.
I feel it's very real.
But it makes it so much more relatable.
Yeah.
That it's not, they don't take themselves so seriously. and then you can care about them more. Where
I think that is important for a narrative audiobook, that you feel that people are real.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something about a believable performance, like it's proper voice acting in the performance, as opposed to just reading out loud narration.
You didn't like the guy who narrated The Name of the Wind, right? The Patrick Rothfuss book that you tried out, and it's one of the, to me, those two books. There will be a third, I hope. Please finish the book. One of the greatest series of fantasy, or possibly a fiction ever written, I feel like. And I think the narrator is one of the greatest narrators that I've ever heard. But you didn't dig it, so I was like, what? What happened?
I might have to try again. It's been a while now. I remember not liking it, but you know, like, you don't remember the taste of something, you just remember that you didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same color. Mm-hmm. So I might try it again just to see if it was just something else. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Maybe it takes some time getting used to. I don't know. But there was just something about his voice that irked me. That's what I remember.
Mm-hmm. Well, it can be like that.
Mm. But it's funny because maybe it might have like a weird real life reason, such as, I don't know, but it reminds me of someone I don't like.
I think it would be a good idea, if you're down for it, if you want to read the books, to actually read them, because I found that I wouldn't want to hear other people's voices, because I have the people in the show in my mind, and I think they're great. And I enjoyed, I guess there was a greater ease of picturing everything because I know who these people are. I mean, later there's new stuff and it's not quite the same, but I have a more visceral sense of who these people are because I've seen it on the show. And I don't want to hear the wrong voice for these characters that I feel this connection to from what I've seen.
That's interesting. I guess it all depends on the... Because funny enough, I think Stephen Fry is a way more compelling Hermione Granger than Emma was. But I'm sorry if I doubt she'll ever watch this, but
I doubt it. She's busy being a great. Is philanthropist the right? Well, she's more like an activist, I guess. Yeah.
So I guess it depends on how good the voice acting is. It's rare to get someone that's good enough to do like a couple of dozen different characters in a way that's really compelling. Mm-hmm. So yeah, probably audiobooks. I think audiobooks are probably better for nonfiction.
It still depends on the narrator.
Yeah.
I know. So The Expanse.
Yeah.
I feel like I haven't done it justice, but I don't want to keep on talking to people, too long.
It's a good overview, and it's more about why you like it than, it's not like this kind of thing. I just want to talk to people that I like about stuff they like, because I think it makes for a really interesting conversation, and this is more for me than anything else. If people want to watch, great.
That's a good way to start. I feel surprised at how much I dug it, and I enjoyed the show. Great show put together. I like I love the acting. I love the commitment to just being what it is. And largely, not trying to go too crazy or fill certain cliches. I love the mix of people in there, the different looking people, different sounding people.
Yeah.
There's a richness to that, and they're not playing it up. It's that the sort of vibe where it doesn't have to be a big thing on a TV show that someone's gay or bi, where it's just like it's happening and no one cares. But they're just showing that this is like part of the richness of what humanity is. And yet with the books, it's so sparely written, with a sense of humour, I don't know how to like take it down to the granular level to explain how they do it. But I cared so much for these characters, but not in a way that I felt I was being made to. And like I said, that they stud it with the parts that make me feel that this is deeper, that gave me pause for thought about what it is to be human. But it's not great literature, and I don't want it to be. I want it to be an easy read, which is more than just reading like in an easy read style. I mean, like Stephen King is often more than just an easy read, though. He's very easy to read. But this is next step. Like they're thinking about bigger stuff. I think that Stephen King follows his muse and he does whatever he wants, and usually it comes out really compellingly. But I think these guys have got something else. They've got something extra to say. And I really appreciate it coming to me in a way that's sort of delicate.
It needs to just be compelling and capture something special and specific. Like, I was thinking, Harry Potter is not particularly well written in many ways, but there's little things that make me smile and tickle my inner child. Like, just the opening line, which is something like, I forget the name, such and such Dursley, like the name of whatever the Harry Potter's uncle and auntie are named, were perfectly normal, thank you very much. And like, I can see it in my head, that kind of British person, without having to see the movie. The kind of people that, we're no nonsense, thank you, we're very British, thank you. Like it captures that. It captures that in an innocent sort of way that kind of, I don't know, it just delivers it really well. So it doesn't matter that it's not highbrow writing. And I don't know about The Expanse, but the way you told me about it, it's just that it's able to convey the ideas that it's trying to paint for you really well.
And their inner worlds are complicated, but it's not self-indulgent. And I like that there's only one book that I think is not so good. And I think it's book 6 maybe. They just have too many points of view characters, to the point where, like, there's one chapter for this person, I don't give a fuck. And I think they recovered from that by the next one, where they just like had it much more honed and focused. Because it's nice to get some new views, but it was too spread out, because what matters is not just what happens, what matters are the people. Yeah. That's what we relate to. And my favorite book, I think, is book 5, which is the next season, because we're just in the minds of the crew of the Rocinante. And we haven't been in some of their points of view before. We haven't been in Amos's point of view before. Yeah,
you mentioned that. Yeah.
We haven't been, I think Naomi hasn't been like a point of view character before. Oh, fucking compelled. And they're in different spots, different things are happening. I so want to spoil it for you just to talk about it, but I can't. I don't think I should do that. And I hope these guys have written the 9th book. I don't know why 9 is a reasonable number. As a side note, in a sort of, tipsy rambling kind of way, the titles of the books allude to the fact that they are thinking at a higher level than just telling this story. That they're like Leviathan Wakes, Caliban's War, Tiamat's Wrath, Babylon's Ashes. Like, they're looking at quite deep mythological and historical motifs for the story that they're telling.
Yeah. Tiamat is the serpent,
I forget I looked it up and now I've forgotten.
I think it's is it a Syrian serpent god that, like, Gilgamesh, like...
There's that sort of area that turns out like Babylon's Ashes. We have in there, we have Persepolis Rising.
So it seems to be like that they're picking on themes of basically the most ancient mythology that exists.
But and so it's a clue, because they never, like, those terms never turn up, as far as I recall, in the book.
Yeah.
They're just like, here's an evocative title, but if you want, you could think about it and think, wait, are they trying, without forcing it down your throat, to tell some pretty eternal truths about humanity? Yes, motherfucker, they are. So go and watch the show, people.
Watch the show, read the books. Excellent. I'll just have one last sip to cheers with. Thank you so much for talking to me about this.
I mean, usually I don't talk to you unless there's money involved. A special occasion.
No, but I think it's an interesting idea for me to somewhat formalize talking about something that is cool. I like talking about stuff that people like, because passion is infectious.
Yeah.
And it's the most interesting way to have a conversation, I think, to talk about something that at least one person is really into, and to kind of explore that.
I think it's funny. It was The Expanse that stood out to you, and maybe we could do more. Who knows about like professional wrestling or Terry Pratchett.
Cool. I mean, I was trying to keep it nerdy. I thought sci-fi, that seems like a clear segue, but I guess WWE can be a nerdy pursuit.
It's nerdy. Pratchett is fantasy. It's still seen as nerdy, and I've been getting reconnected with my love of Pratchett by sharing the books with Jamie, and he's been getting into it. you should have seen my bedroom as a teenager. Like, I had the Discworld posters, Discworld map. There was a guy who did merchandise where you could get a degree from the university within there, and I had that degree. I had the signed prints. Most of my books were signed. I was a member of every newsletter.
Okay.
Whew! I feel sad that I don't have that. I let that go, and it's nice to reconnect with it, because that kind of level of passion, I don't think it's worth growing out of. I think it's better to treasure it.
That's what I want to do with this series. Reconnect with my nerdy side. Like, I think it was an important part of me that was sort of like, oh, well, it's not useful, so I need to figure out business and shit. And like, well, that's the part I like the most. Getting obsessed about, Game of Thrones, or, the Foundation series, or, like a video game. Like, that. Those are the things that made time disappear for me, and there were some of the most formative things, like getting really into a particular thing, whatever it is. And I want to explore what makes other people feel like that, because I think it's interesting. Anyway, cheers. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you for having me.
Hope you enjoyed this
on my own podcast.
Yeah.